Hey, what's going on? Steven here with Davis from WIT.
What's up, guys?
How's it going, Davis? All right, today, Davis and I are bringing you another great guest to the Home Service Success TV podcast interview series. And our guest today is absolutely going to teach you something that you really want to know about. He's going to teach you how he's taken his company over the course of about the last 4 years and been completely virtual running a home service company since then. But prior to that, this person's been in the HVAC industry for about 15 years, been running his own company for almost a decade. Like I mentioned, he has been completely virtual for almost the last 4 years. And on top of all of that, besides being an amazing dad, which I'll plug that in right there, besides all of that, he's also running 3 podcasts, one very specific for the home service industry, and then 2 others for what I will call local marketing and also supporting the local business community. And also sits on the board, or actually I'll have him correct me because I think I'm going to say this wrong, but is a very huge part of the Savannah local community in the Chamber of Commerce, and might actually be somewhere high up on that ladder, but I'm going to let him tell you that. So without further ado, Tersh Blisset, what's up, man? Welcome to today's show. How are you?
What's up, brother? No pressure.
Yeah, I expect you to deliver massive pinpointed content that's going to help people go from, not being virtual at all to adding another million to their bottom line over the course of the next 12 months.
While also transitioning to virtual.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we shouldn't leave that one.
Right. Yeah. So it's so I'm the president of the Small Business Chamber in Savannah, and on the executive board of Buy Local, and past executive board leader on the Leukemia Lymphoma Society here in the area. So that's my philanthropy give, and then the podcast for the local business owners to just so they can have some evergreen content to help with their marketing.
That's awesome, man. All right, so I sold you short a little bit on the intro. My apologies.
No,
awesome,
cool.
man.
It's cool. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me,
man. So let's jump right in, man. Let's jump right in and let's start off with this whole virtual thing, because I mean, you've been running a completely virtual company for almost 4 years now. And everybody that probably said you were crazy up until March of 2020, you're looking at them going, okay, well, hey, I told you this is going to be something you should at least pay attention to and start implementing some of the stuff for.
Yeah, we definitely had that conversation a lot where people said you can't have you can't have good culture by doing that. You can't grow a business, and you have to interact with people, and you can't do it over Zoom. You can't do it over Skype or FaceTime. You have to do it in person. If your guys don't come to the shop every morning, like, how do you know if they're actually doing their invoices properly? How do you know all these things? And to me, my response in that exact scenario is, why are you waiting until the next morning to find out if they did their invoices correctly? If you don't have that point of contact all day throughout the day, then I mean, you're 24 hours behind the competition. So, so we've got a roadmap set. So we'll be virtual throughout 10 million. So and up until that point, we'll need some stuff, but my goal is to stay remote and virtual until we get to the 10 million mark.
That's awesome, man. So let's do this. Let's define virtual. So what exactly does it mean as far as the way that you're running Service Emperor right now, that your company out of Savannah? What does virtual mean? Like, do you have an office that you sometimes go into, or that some people go into? What exactly does virtual mean?
Nope. So we have no central location. We have no office per se. If you're watching the video, this is my home office, and my service experts can come here if they like to hang out, but it's purely my house. When we meet up at our clients. We do commercial also, and so we'll meet up at their restaurants for a monthly breakfast, and we try, obviously in the name, the monthly breakfast, we try to do it once a month. During the busy season, we'll back it down to a quarter. And when we do our our hiring sessions, they're all via Zoom. They always have been via Zoom. And our onboarding process is remote. Dispatchers, they have Zoom up all the time, so we can see, and they're muted, but we can see and interact as if we're right next to each other. But everyone works remotely in the office, so they work from their home. And we had a situation one time where we thought we were going to have to rent one of the shared spaces because of restrictions from that person's home life, but ended up that didn't have to happen. So, and if that was the case, we would rent, one of those small desks at a shared space. But other than that, we have no office space at all. We have some mini storage units where the guys can pick up equipment and stuff like that. And our supply house will restock those. And so like a consignment type thing. And we actually have those strategically placed so that none of the service guys have to go very far to get materials. That way, our service area doesn't have to be like 30 miles from one location, which is our office. It can mutate and morph depending on where the service tech lives or the service expert lives. So if we hire another service expert, all we have to do is rent another mini storage container unit and have our supply house, our vendor, stock that storage unit, and then all of a sudden our service area has mutated in that area if that's what we desire. Obviously our avatar has to be in that area, but that's kind of how we've designed things to work.
So a couple questions for you. Did you guys start 100% virtual, or did you have to transition?
Mm-hmm. No, we started with that end goal, and it's intentional too, because before March, before everything happened, before we had any kind of pandemic, people would look at you like you had three eyes whenever you would ask for something, anything related to or pertaining to being remote. They would just they gawk at you, and so it was very intentional as far as like we had to make sure that everyone understood how to use iPads. Everyone understood how to use Slack for communication or Teams for Microsoft Teams. Everyone knew how to get into Outlook and into OneDrive. And so everything's stored via the cloud. And so when we were making decisions on like a CRM, it had to be 100% cloud-based. We couldn't do anything that would depend on, say, QuickBooks Desktop, because we needed to use QuickBooks Online because everything had to be in the cloud. So there was certain things like that was we really had to just. Some things became frustrating, but then over time, technology moved really fast, and it was just the perfect timing for us because there were certain things that weren't available in 2011 or 2015 or 16 that became available at the middle or end of 2018. And that was exactly what we needed in order to make that cloud-based transition, because most of your CRMs, they were all, you had to have something on site. You had to have some way of storing it. You could do things if you knew what you were doing across the cloud, but there weren't a lot of them that were like quote unquote cloud based. And then, 16, 17, 18, they started really getting good at being cloud based 100%. So it was perfect timing in that aspect also.
So did you find that was really influencing your hiring decisions? And certainly I would imagine the way you have to train, but like, if you're going to hire a new tech, they're going to have to know they're going to have some tech savviness to them, right?
That's a good point. And before, if you would have asked me this question, say, I don't know, 6 or 8 months ago, I would have said, well, it's because, we're 100% millennials. We have all millennials. They all know how to use, all this technology. That is not true. Because I have just hired millennials and not even had the question like, hey, do you know how to create an Apple ID account? And they're like, I just assumed that they knew how to do it. And then come to find out, like, that was a bad assumption on my behalf, because just because these guys are millennials, that does not mean that they know technology. So yeah, that is definitely, we had to bring that into the interview process. Like, can you at least figure out technology? Because there's some older guys that work with us that they're whizzes with technology. They're they're great. And then we have some 22 and 23-year-olds that just can't wrap their head around, the technology aspect of it.
Funny how that works. I mean, it always makes me think about like whether you think you can or think you can't, either way, you're right. And
You're right.
making judgments around like, hey, maybe somebody's a little bit older, they're not going to know how to create an Apple ID versus, oh, they're younger, they're a millennial, they're 23. Of course they know how to do it. And so, I mean, what that makes me think about is just anybody that's watching or listening to this right now, that's like, oh my gosh, like my team could never do that. Who knows? Maybe three-quarters of your team can actually do it. Maybe you're the one that's bad at technology, so you assume everybody else is.
Right.
But if you set an intention to do something and move towards it, you absolutely can accomplish it.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's very much like if you're willing to put forth the effort, technology changes constantly. So if somebody's a whiz at something right now, doesn't mean they're going to continue to be a whiz, in the future. So you could jump on a new platform like, TikTok, and comes out, and then next thing you know, you're the TikTok guru and you didn't even know how to operate Facebook, and it's just like technology is changing so much and it's going through so many reiterations that there's no reason for you. I mean, if you hate learning, that's one thing, but I mean, you shouldn't be a business owner because it's constantly changing. Well, in my opinion, it is anyways.
Yeah. Certainly is. So another question for you, Tersh. You mentioned how without an office, you can kind of have storage units and actually work a wider service area. So have you found that benefits your business because you can kind of serve markets that you otherwise wouldn't, or be able to kind of follow demand in that way?
Yeah, it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's kind of like you say yes a lot more often, and you just have to be careful. Now we have enough service experts to where I don't get screamed at whenever we say yes to certain things, like going in certain areas. But I have done it before where a guy would have to drive 45 minutes to go to a service call because we had mutated this service area. So we really did, at one point we allowed our service area to get too large, and then we pulled it back in, and then now we're kind of doing it more controlled. So we had fast growth, and then we didn't shrink, but we just were a lot more focused because we seen it was a pain point. It was a pain point for our first line customer, which is our service experts. And so then we kind of fixed that, and then now we can move back out. But yeah, to go back to your question, I am very much an entrepreneur, and I'm very much guilty of being that person who sees a shiny object and just like gravitates towards it. So I definitely could be, exactly. It's dollar signs. So I'm definitely guilty of that. So I have to be very conscious of that and realize the pain point. And I think one of the biggest things was I went to a class, and part of that class, this is a leadership class, and part of that class was I had to get the unbiased, like, feedback from my entire team. Like, hey, look, this isn't even coming to me. This is going to other people. Tell them what you dislike about my leadership style or dislike about, it was like 5 questions. And the feedback was brutally honest. And I was like, geez, did you really have to do that, guys? Like, cause it was like, they just stuck it to me. And I was thankful that they did too, because although there wasn't a long list, it was a consistent list from everybody. And one of those things was like, let's get really, really, really good at this before we get, move on to something else. And so, yeah, I could be guilty of trying to make that service area too large, too fast. But I'm also in a very small area. And so I know that for me to reach my goals of getting to the $50 million mark, I have to have a lot more clientele than what we have. And so like my vision, my long-term vision, sometimes my short-term vision has to slow down my long-term vision a little bit because of me wanting to move in more so fast.
So that's interesting. It almost sounds like it's a similar issue as if you were to have an office. Like, it doesn't really have a huge benefit being remote in that regard. Maybe it's more flexible and you can be a little bit more, on the spot about making a decision. But still, it's like, somewhat centralized. And at the end of the day, you can't just expand it anywhere.
Well, before all the pandemic and everything happened, before anything, was to change within the world, we like I had my backpack and that was my office. And so it made it so that I could go networking a lot easier.
Yep.
So I had an extremely strict daily schedule. So Mondays and Fridays I worked on the business, and then on Tuesdays and Thursdays I would network or work in the business. And then Wednesdays was nothing but podcasting. So if I did not, if somebody wanted an appointment on Wednesday, I was like, sorry, podcast day, can't do it. If it was a networking event on a Tuesday or a Monday or a Friday, sorry, I can't network. It's networking days are only Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Yeah.
But I had the ability to just grab my backpack and just go, and I could just take it. And so like, even now, if I wanted to go to, I don't know, if I wanted to go to Colorado, and I could just grab my backpack and everything's there and I can just go. And it's always been that way. And that was the biggest part of remote that I wanted to be able to do, because I have a lot of family that lives in Columbus, Ohio. We live in Savannah, Georgia. And so I wanted to be able to travel there and still be able to operate and function just like I was sitting here at my home office. So that's the biggest things. My guys, most of the times, they have no clue where I am, other than like I'll tell them. It's not a secret or anything, but I could be. I guess is the best way to put it, is our conversation doesn't change or morph one way or the other. Like whenever I was a GM for a large company in town, it was as soon as the boss is gone, the cat's going to play. Like it was, you weren't there. It was bad news. Like there was not going to be productive, things were going to slip through the crack. And if the boss is never there, then it's not the same mentality. And
so why aren't you on the beach right now, Tersh?
Actually, I grew up on the beach and I don't like the beach. That's just not my forte. I honestly, and Steven and I have talked about this before. He's asking me, he's like, so if you could be doing anything right now, like in the future, what do you want to do? Like with yourself, you think to the future, what do you want to do? It's like, man, seriously, like this is it. People are like, you want to go on vacation? Like, what's your perfect vacation? And I even had a service expert that we were onboarding yesterday on Monday, and I was taking him for the ride along, and he was like, hey man, so what do you do for vacations and stuff? And I'm like, I don't. I just work. And he's like, seriously, that's all you do? I was like, if I was somewhere else, all I'd be doing was, I would be miserable because I was thinking about work. But it's not in a bad way. It's just like I just enjoy it so much that I'm able to that's what I do, and I get enjoyment. I don't get exhausted. I go on vacation and I get exhausted on vacation, come back to work, and that's where I recoup.
So you're able to kind of build in this work-life balance within your typical work week versus having to work really like a 60-hour week and then take a week-long vacation. It's just all kind of built in anyway. Yeah,
exactly. And bringing Julie, my wife, she came on board in 2020. She really came on board hot and heavy in 2020. And it's really been cool because our kids, they all know like this. Our entire family is surrounded by, Service Emperor, and whenever the phones ring, they know the ringtone for work. That we have a work ringtone, and then we have everybody else's ringtone, and they just know to zip it and wait until the phone call's over and they're done. Like, and it's just like our kids could be home whenever when the school shut down. Our life wasn't affected. I mean, very little at all was it affected, because
you're already doing all the things. Yeah.
When we had a second, we would just walk into the kids' playroom, which we transitioned into their little classroom, and we would like, hey, you need any help with anything? And then we'd walk back into our office, and then we'd go on a trip, and everything was very, very similar to how it was before. So we're really thankful. And then we were getting a lot of questions like, how do you possibly do that? And I'm like,
right.
Honestly, if I was in an office and I didn't force myself to automate as much as I did, I'd have to have 3 or 4 more office staff.
Yeah.
Just we've created so much automation that was required because we were remote.
Well, that's also something I think is really interesting. And Stephen, feel free to chime in if you have any thoughts here on the tools, because I think that would be something, if I was starting a virtual business, like that would take me, I feel like, months to figure out what are the right tools to use in terms of a cost perspective, in terms of an output and performance perspective in terms of what my techs and other staff are going to be comfortable using. So I guess tell us a little bit about that process.
So are you asking what tools I use?
Essentially, and also like how you found those tools and how you decided those were the right tools.
And I think that's the important thing is like, here's the add-on that I would put is, how much does the actual tool matter, right? Because I mean, Tersh, you and I both know, right? Like we can end up chasing the next best thing and, oh, we got to use this tool because now it does this and it does this. How much of that actually matters in being a virtual company versus, in your time back in the day when you guys weren't? Because I think people will potentially or can potentially get hung up on being like, okay, cool, I just got to find the right tools. And I think I know the answer to it, but I'm not going to say it. Is it really that much about the tool, or is it about, your desire and just the way that you set it up?
Yeah, so you already know the answer, but I'll use this analogy. It's like you keep saying, if I had that K20 drain cleaner, I would be way better at being a plumber. If I had that duct cleaning machine, we could just kill it with indoor air quality. And then you buy that K20 or you buy that duct cleaner and it just sits in the corner. It's like, all right, you got the tools. Are you using them? So yeah, if you're going to use it, there's great tools out there, but there's also a lot of just stuff you don't need, but you'll just buy it or use it because, or start to use it because someone says that it's a great thing to use on a podcast. And like, that's, I did that. I went through that process pretty much all of 2017. I was just absorbing podcasts. I was Social Media Examiner, Michael Stelzner, like any guest that Michael Stelzner had on, I'd follow one of that person's podcast or whatever, read a book. It really got into like I was just, it becomes analysis paralysis. So you get that paralysis of just over analyzing, like I need the perfect tool, or I need this tool will make this work. It really boils down to, quit writing things on sticky notes, put all your processes down on a piece of paper. And when I say piece of paper, I mean, if you're using Outlook or if you're using Gmail, those things are already built into it. If you're using Office 365 and you're paying the subscription, don't pay another penny because you literally are buying everything already. You have Teams built into it. You have OneNote built into it, OneDrive. So every one of our policies and procedures are put into OneDrive. We communicate via Slack. Or Teams. We're trying to transition into Teams, but Teams is so robust that Slack is a lot easier for our teams to communicate with, and it's a free program. So realistically, other than our CRM, we probably spend $100 a month on software that enables us to be remote.
So you're really just within the Office 365 environment for most 80% of what you do.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned Slack,
exactly.
Online, and then what was the other one?
It's Gmail. So if anybody's using G Suite, because some people just don't want the Office 365, the subscription, the G Suite is a lot cheaper. I think it's like $5 a person or something like that. And it has, although it's not your true Excel, it has, Google Sheets or whatever. So you have a lot of flexibility. And I think that they even have a chat platform built into them too, or they used to. So, there's inexpensive options out there too, and even Office 365 is not expensive. So,
gotcha. So I'm getting the sense it's less about the tool. Like the tools, there's a bunch of options out there. It's just a matter of kind of a cost comparison, what you're already using, and what's easily you can integrate. But it's more probably about the processes and the people, right?
Yeah.
So I guess give us a little bit
just
of
making sure that the biggest thing is consistency is probably the best way to say it. So making sure that your team constantly follows the instructions, because even ours, when we're onboarding someone, it's so easy for them to just pick up the phone and text me. And
Right.
I have to say, okay, we'll put it in the Slack channel, put it in the right channel, even in Slack. So we have channels built for service department, install department, commercial service, commercial install. We have a banter channel. So if it's not work related, if you just want to send something goofy or something, something that's important, we have the business owners, which is Julie and I's just channel, private channel. And then we have channels for each individual employee so that Julie and I or the team office can speak with just those individuals. And it's funny because sometimes they ask, so we have one for dispatch requests. So when a service expert is finished with a job, they want to be debriefed and dispatched to the next job. They say, please dispatch or debrief and dispatch. And they do it only in the dispatch channel. And sometimes they'll put it in the next channel up because they accidentally clicked the wrong button. And then it's funny because they're like, oh, my fat fingers, I'm sorry, wrong channel. And then you just put it right back into the dispatch channel and ask for a dispatch. And they also do that because they know I mute most of the channels, especially the ones like banter, because they're just like chom, 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 chom all day long. And so I'm like, I got to mute that crap because I can't have that distraction.
Totally.
So one of my questions is like, I'm thinking through like from a business owner standpoint, right? Like somebody that might be listening to this. One of the big questions that would come up for me is, how do you build culture? How do you build trust? How do you do these things that for decades and even centuries we commonly did in the office, sitting around the water cooler, doing trainings and stuff like that? Like, how do you build an amazing team in an industry where service and client experience or customer experience is so important?
One of the biggest things, the banter channel, giving them the freedom to goof off and have those conversations without any sort of reprimand. That's a big thing. We will have this weekend coming up, everybody's coming to my house and we're having a low country bowl, which is, if you're not from the area, that's like where you get crab legs and shrimp and sausage and potatoes and you boil them all together, corn, and you just... big old thing tray, and then you just put it out on a table and everybody just eats and hangs out. So we'll have like events like that. We have the monthly breakfast events, and those breakfast events, they'll last 2, maybe 3 hours, and it's a lot of goofing off and stuff. And also when we debrief, it's not a strict debrief, and there's very little reprimand involved in our business, and there's a lot of coaching involved. So there's a lot of freedom to make mistakes, and that's just appreciated by the service experts. And we have one guy that came on board with us, and he was like, this is hard work. Like, I get home, I'm exhausted, but he said, I have yet to get up the next morning and not want to come to work. He's like, I just enjoy it. You can tell that everybody cares about you. There's a true sense of empathy, and that's something that has to be very deliberately shared whenever you're sharing it over Zoom or you're sharing it over a phone call after, when you're debriefing. It's like a guy steps through a ceiling and he's like, man, I'm getting fired. And this guy just happens to be, it was his first day at work.
Oh man, he's already nervous.
He's nervous already. Steps through the ceiling. The guy that he's riding along with, he's like, man, I'm fired. I'm fired. The guy's like, nah, you're not fired. As long as it don't cost more than $500, you're not fired. And he was like, what do you mean? He was like, because if you make a $500 mistake, Tersh won't even say anything to you. And he was like, seriously? Yeah. He's like, yeah, but don't make another mistake today. You have to wait till tomorrow to make another mistake.
Yeah, you're mistake maximum.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So it's just one of those things. It's that
he was like,
first it was a bad situation. And then Matt said it was a horrible placement of the AC unit. It was on a slope. It was just the worst scenario that the guy could be in. And the client, we were there to do a sales call. They weren't going to go with us, but then because of the way we handled the situation, they ended up actually going with us anyways, even though we stepped through the ceiling to replace the system. And so just the culture that we constantly are building up, that you just, it's all for one for all. It's one of our core values, integrity first. We live and die by core values. And it's one of those things where you can have an office and your office becomes your crutch. You're like, every time you walk in the office, you see the core values all the way down the wall, like hallway, like they're on the wall. You don't know the core values, but when you are remote and you're not there with each other every day, you have to say the core values. You have to live the core values. And then when they're like, hey, like one of my guys was like, man, I didn't feel comfortable climbing up on the roof because the ladder didn't extend past the edge of the roof. And immediately I said, don't you dare get on the roof. What is the core value? Safety first. Like safety in everything that we do. And he's like, yeah, I know, but it was the end of the day. I'm trying to get the job done. I didn't want to like upset anybody, have another service expert come over with a bigger ladder. I was like, safety first. Like it doesn't matter. And so they're like, all right, I get it. I get it totally. And so those core values, we live and die by them, and we say them constantly because they're not on a wall that we can use as a crutch and say, hey, it's in a fancy picture frame that we spent a couple $100 on. Like, why don't you know the core values?
That most companies, quite frankly, that all three of us know, they have them hung on the wall, and 90% of the people that work there could barely say 2 of the 6 of them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Much less actually live by them.
Right. So my buddy Jesse Cole, he has the Savannah Bananas. They got so witty with their core values that they did one for the alphabet for like the first, I don't know, half the alphabet. I think it stops at G or H or something. And so like each one of them, and they sing them or something. Like, of course Jesse would do something like that, but they do something goofy with it so everybody memorizes them because they fit along with the alphabet or something.
Yep. Yeah, man.
Well, that's awesome. We are just about at time. Is there anything else, Stephen, that you want to throw in?
Tersh, maybe talk a little bit real briefly about metrics. How do you keep how do you wake up, or how do you leave the end of the day or the end of the week or the end of the month feeling confident that the business is running smoothly? Because I think that some owners are sitting out there like, okay, I can get on board with all this stuff, but like there's so many unseen things, right? Like when you're sitting in an office, you just catch these little things. So how are you kind of keeping that big picture view, either specific KPIs or just whatever comes to mind for you?
So pretty much if I have money in my checking account, we're good. If I don't, then we're bad. So no,
yeah, well, and I'll add to that only because I know how you run your business. You run your business off of profit first, and so do we. And so we can actually say that, but if you don't run your business off of profit first, you should not be running your business based on if there's money in your checking account, because there's multiple accounts, and you know that you have profit, you got your taxes paid, you got your operating. But I mean, Tersh, that's actually a great point. Yeah. Like we run the company the same way, and we don't have a ton of fancy KPIs because it's set up to know like, hey, if there's money in these accounts and it's going up every month, like everything is taken care of and the company's growing.
Yeah, if your OpEx account, if your OpEx account's good, you're good. Honestly, it's and I hate to be facetious that way. If you haven't read or listened to Profit First by Mike McAllowitz, listen to it. And then also, shameless plug, I am an advisor for Mike McAllowitz. Fix This Next. That was another thing that was really influential. If you can see this, if you see that yellow book that's on its side on my desk, on my bookshelf back behind me, but that's Fix This Next by Mike McAllowitz. And it was just one of those things like, all right, so in order for me to stay alive, what do I need to fix next in the business? But yeah, as far as KPIs go, I learned this from Disney, Mike Disney, a coach of mine, Mike Disney, it's everything that you measure, like, is it better today than it was yesterday? And so people are like, okay, so what labor percentage should I have? Should it be below 30%? And like, that's how we bonus our guys if they're below 30% of their labor percentage of their revenue that they generated. But if he's at 35%, am I going to penalize him? Well, was he at 34% yesterday, or was he at 36% yesterday? Because if he was at 36% and today's he's at 35%, hell yeah, man. Like rock on. You're doing good stuff. A coach of mine long time ago, when I was first getting into the industry, he used the analogy of the glass half full, glass half empty analogy. And he said, it doesn't matter if the glass is half full or if it's half empty. Whenever you see that glass, what was it? Was it emptier? Was it at 3/4 of the way, or was it at a quarter of the way down? And now it's a halfway. So it's actually improved. So it's all in perspective when it comes to those KPIs. And I do watch KPIs. Don't get me wrong. I have, shameless plug. I have Service Titan CRM. It sends me KPIs constantly all throughout the day. But you can get analysis paralysis by watching KPIs if you're not careful. But honestly, you want to make sure that your technicians are converting, your service experts are converting system sales or service calls, and what that conversion percentage is. You want to make sure their labor percentage is on point, because if you have a guy that's just eating up the clock, but then take it into perspective. Is the guy's labor percentage high, but then he gets all these reviews for you because he just is creating mad customer relationships, and these people are referring you to? It's just, take it with a grain of salt. If you live and die by the numbers, you're not building relationships necessarily. And the only way you're going to create culture in an operation that is virtual is by having relationships that are like my guys right now. If you said something cross about me right now, I guarantee you that you would have to sleep with something under your pillow, because they're going to shank you in your sleep, because that's the culture that we have right now. And awesome. I mean, the guys know we do it weekly, a scorecard, so they know how their metrics are going. They know if they're going up or down. But it's one of those things where it's like, hey man, this is a relationship. We're building a relationship. If you want to improve, I want you to improve. How do I help you improve? And let's get you to your end goal. Find out their why, and then figure out how to make it happen.
I love that,
man. That is awesome, Tersh. And we could talk about this all day. It's actually a really fun conversation and really relevant. I think it's really relevant, obviously, given the COVID situation, but even just beyond that, you see more and more companies moving remote, moving virtually. And even if they do have an office, just people not necessarily going to the office every day. So really appreciate your input. Where can people find you, Tersh, if they want to look you up?
Oh, anywhere. I'm on everything. Literally. It's at Tersh Blisset. That's most of my personal pages. Service Business Mastery Podcast is the podcast that I host for the service business. I think we're at like 475 episodes now. And we got about 45 or 50 that are in the queue waiting to be released. And their topics about, some of it's boring, some of it's interesting. I don't know. I find it kind of interesting most of the times, but yeah. So any of your podcast catchers, we're there on that podcast. Yeah. Service Emperor is my business. If you want to see the stellar website that Wit Digital created, that's go check that out. Shameless plug there.
We'll take it.
For Wit Digital, they did a jam-up job. That yeah, man. I was actually looking at that. I mean, just not to go off topic here, but man, I was looking at our website on the back end yesterday, day before yesterday. I was like, man, there is so much stuff here that wasn't here last month that I just had no idea that was here. Just like it just keeps coming. So that's cool.
Awesome, man. We work our butts off for you. Let's wrap up a couple big takeaways. Tersh, thanks as always, man. We really appreciate it. You're awesome, dude. You're such an industry leader. So a couple of my big takeaways from this one is I love what Tersh does about booking out like Monday and Friday for working on the business, Tuesday and Thursday networking, Wednesday is for podcasting. And that probably changes over time based on what's important to him. But Davis and I interviewed somebody a couple weeks ago. I forgot who it was, but they said basically like, if you've got to live by your calendar, so put whatever's important on your calendar. And that's really what Tersh does. And so make sure that your calendar reflects what's important to you by blocking out those days on your calendar. That was really, really cool. Choose, I kind of pulled this out. Choose what you want your life and your company to be, and then go and create it. Don't let it happen the other way around. Don't say, oh, well, I'm going to fit my life into the way that my business works right now. If that's not the way you want to create your life and you want to create your business, then do it the other way around. Create what you actually want and then fit the business into that model. Document all of your processes, live and die by your core values, and the importance of building relationships, both inside the business with your team, but also outside with your customers. And much like Tersh's employees, where if you say something bad about him, they've done such a good job of building relationships that you might want to sleep with one eye open because you're probably going to get shanked. So you want your team to have your back just the same way that Tersh's does. So take the time out to build those relationships. And those are my big takeaways for today, Davis.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thanks, guys. Thank you, Tersh.
Awesome.
Pleasure.
Thank you guys for having me.